The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind that makes you feel like the whole world is crying. Matched my mood, I guess. I was driving my beat-up old truck, the wipers squeaking a mournful rhythm against the windshield. Another day, another dead end. The factory I'd worked at for 15 years had shut down 6 months ago. Restructuring, they called it. I called it disaster. My wife, Sarah, was trying her best, picking up extra shifts at the diner, but her tips barely covered. The electric bill, our savings gone, vanished like smoke. Every morning I'd look at my kids, Lily, who was 10 and trying so hard to be brave, and Tom, 7, who just looked confused and hungry a lot of the time. That look in Tom's eyes, that's what tore me up the most. "Anything, Mark?" Sarah would ask when I came home, her voice carefully neutral, trying not to sound too hopeful or too despairing. "Nah, love. Same old," I'd reply, trying to keep the bitterness out of my own voice. Today, I'd been to 3 places. A warehouse that wasn't hiring, a construction site where the foreman just laughed, a temp agency that offered me filing work for minimum wage, 3 hours a day starting next week. It was something, but it felt like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. I was on my way home, the rain still lashing down, when I saw them, huddled in the doorway of a closed-down storefront, a woman and 2 small children. They were soaked through. The little girl, maybe Lily's age, had her face buried in her mother's side. The boy, younger than Tom, was just staring out at the rain with huge, empty eyes. The woman looked broken, not just tired or sad, but like something inside her had snapped. My first instinct, and I'm ashamed to admit it, was to drive on. What could I do? I had my own family to worry about. We were barely keeping our heads above water. Every penny counted, every scrap of food. But then I saw the boy shiver, a violent, uncontrollable shudder that shook his whole tiny frame. And I thought of Tom. I pulled over, the truck groaning in protest. I rolled down the window, rain immediately splattering my face. "Hey, you folks okay?" I called out. The woman looked up, startled. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She clutched her children tighter. We're fine," she said, her voice barely a whisper, hoarse. "Fine." They looked anything but fine. "You sure? You're all soaked. Can I give you a ride somewhere? A shelter, maybe?" She shook her head. "They're full, we tried." Her voice cracked on the last word, something twisted in my gut. Full. Of course they were full. Times were tough for everyone. Have you eaten today?" I asked, dreading the answer. She looked down, avoiding my eyes. The little girl peeked out from her mother's coat, her gaze locking onto mine. It was the same look Tom had. Hunger. Pure, gnawing hunger. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. I had $27 in my wallet. It was supposed to be for gas to get to that temp job next week, and maybe a loaf of bread and some milk. "Look," I said, making a decision that felt both crazy and absolutely necessary. "There's a diner just up the road. Let me get you all something warm to eat, please." She hesitated, pride warring with desperation on her face. Then, she looked at her children and the pride crumbled. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." Getting them into the truck was an ordeal. They were so cold, their clothes clinging to them. I cranked up the heat, and soon the cab was filled with the smell of damp wool and something else. A faint, sickly sweet smell that I later realized was probably just prolonged hunger. At the diner, I sat them in a booth and told the waitress, a kind-faced woman named Betty who knew Sarah, to bring them whatever they wanted. The kids stared at the menus, like they were treasure maps. The mother, whose name I learned was Maria, just kept murmuring, "Thank you, God bless you." They ordered simple things, soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, hot chocolate. When the food came, they ate like they hadn't seen a meal in days, and they probably hadn't. I watched the little boy, Leo, carefully dunk his sandwich into his soup, his eyes closed in what looked like pure bliss. The girl, Elena, sipped her hot chocolate slowly, savoring every drop. Maria ate slowly, almost painfully, taking small bites and watching her children. I ordered a coffee I couldn't really afford and tried to make small talk. She told me her story, haltingly at first, Then with a rush, as if the dam of her misery had finally burst. Her husband had left them, took all their money, cleared out. Their apartment. They'd been on the streets for 3 days. She'd been trying to find work, anything. But no one was hiring a woman with 2 young children and no fixed address. My own problems suddenly seemed smaller. Still huge, still terrifying, but not this. Not this raw, immediate desperation. When they were done, I paid the bill. It came to $22. I had $5 left. Enough for a loaf of bread, maybe. Gas for the temp job was, out of the question for now. I don't know how to thank you, Maria said, tears welling in her eyes again. Don't worry about it, I said, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the diner's heating. Everyone needs a little help sometimes. But you, she looked at my worn jacket, my old truck. You don't look like you have much to spare. I shrugged. Enough for today. I couldn't just leave them there. The rain had eased a bit, but it was still cold. Where will you go now? I asked. She shook her head, fresh despair clouding her face. I don't know. Maybe try the church on Elm Street. Sometimes they have emergency vouchers for a motel room. Elm Street was on my way. I can take you there, I offered. In the truck again, Elena, the little girl, shyly reached out and touched my arm. Thank you, mister, she said, her voice small. The hot chocolate was the bestest. My throat tightened. You're welcome, sweetheart. At the church, a kind-faced pastor listened to Maria's story. He looked troubled. We don't have vouchers right now, Maria. The fund is depleted, but we have a small room in the back, usually for storage. It's not much, but it's dry, and there are a couple of cots. You could stay there for a night or two until we can figure something out. Relief washed over Maria's face so intensely, she nearly sagged. Oh, thank you, Pastor. Thank you so much. I helped them carry in the few meager belongings they Adam, a couple of plastic bags filled with clothes. The room was tiny, smelling of old books and floor polish, but it was clean and warm. The pastor found some blankets. As I was leaving, Maria grabbed my hand. I'll never forget this, mister. Mark, I said. My name is Mark. Mark, she repeated. God sent you to us today. I mumbled something about being glad I could help and drove away, my heart a strange mixture of heavy and light. Heavy for their plight, light for having done something. When I got home, Sarah was there, her face etched with worry. Mark, where have you been? I was getting so anxious. I told her everything. About Maria, Elena, and Leo. About the diner, the $22. She listened silently, her eyes searching mine. When I finished, she didn't scold me about the money. Instead, she came over and hugged me, tight. You did a good thing. Mark, she said, her voice thick with emotion. A really good thing. That night, dinner was plain pasta with a smear of tomato sauce from a nearly empty jar. But somehow it tasted better than usual. Lily and Tom were full of questions. About the family I'd helped. Were they really, really hungry, Daddy? Tom asked, his eyes wide. Yes, son, they really were. Can we give them some of our toys? Lily asked. She loved her dolls more than anything. My heart swelled. That's a lovely idea, sweetie. Maybe we can visit them tomorrow. The next day, I used my last $5 to buy a small bag of groceries. Bread, peanut butter, some apples, a carton of milk. Sarah packed up a few of Lily's old but still good dolls and some of Tom's toy cars. We drove to the church. Maria was overwhelmed. Elena's face lit up when she saw the dolls, and Leo immediately started making vroom vroom noises with a little red car. We stayed for a while. Sarah and Maria talked like old friends. I played with Leo, showing him how to make the car jump over a crack in the floor. For a little while, I forgot about my own worries. I just saw 2 kids, happy with simple gifts, and a mother whose eyes held a flicker of hope where yesterday there had only been despair. Over the next few days, we visited them regularly. Sarah would bring leftovers from the diner, or we'd scrape together a few dollars for some basic supplies. We learned more about Maria. She was a hard worker, had cleaned houses before her husband left. She was smart and determined. The pastor was trying to find more permanent help for them. He'd made some calls. Meanwhile, My temp job started. Filing. Mind-numbingly boring, but it was 3 hours of pay. It wasn't much, but combined with Sarah's earnings, it meant we weren't going to lose the house this month. Just one afternoon, after my filing shift, I went to the church. Maria was looking a little brighter. "Mark, good news," she said, a genuine smile on her face. "The pastor found a family from the congregation who needs a live-in housekeeper and nanny. They met me yesterday. They liked me. I start next week. It comes with a small apartment. Over their garage." I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. "Maria, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you." Elena and Leo came running up, excited. "We're going to have our own beds, Mark," Elena chirped. "And a yard," Leo added, his eyes shining. That evening, telling Sarah the news, I felt a profound sense of, peace? It was strange. My own situation hadn't magically improved. I was still underemployed, still worried sick about the future. But helping Maria and her kids, seeing them find a safe haven, it had done something to me. It was like a little light had been switched on in a dark room. A few days later, Maria and the kids moved into their new place. We helped them. It wasn't much, just a couple of rooms, but it was clean and bright. The family they were working for seemed kind and welcoming. As we were leaving, Maria pressed a small, clumsily wrapped package into my hand. "What's this?" I asked. "It's not much," she said, blushing a little. "I knitted it for you, for everything." Later, at home, I unwrapped it. It was a simple, dark blue knitted scarf. Not perfectly made, a few dropped stitches here and there. But it was warm, and it was made with gratitude. I put it on. It felt like the warmest scarf in the world. The next week, something shifted. I still went to my filing job, still scoured the classifieds, still faced rejections. But the crushing despair that had been my constant companion had lessened. I found myself thinking about Maria, about how a small act of kindness, a shared meal, had made such a difference. It wasn't about the money. The $22 I'd spent at the diner was a lot for us then, but what it bought, for them and strangely for me, was immeasurable. One morning, Sarah was looking at the local paper. "Mark, look at this." She pointed to a small, Duusi local community center. They're looking for a part-time caretaker. Handyman skills a plus. It's not full-time, but it's more hours than the filing. My heart gave a little leap. Handyman skills. That I had. I'd always been good with my hands. "I'll go down there today," I said, a spark of my old self returning. I put on Maria's scarf. It was a chilly morning. The community center was a bustling place, full of kids and seniors. I met with the director, Mrs. Henderson, a brisk, no-nonsense woman with kind eyes. We talked for a while. I told her about my factory experience, my ability to fix things, my willingness to work hard. I didn't tell her about our struggles, or about Maria. It didn't seem relevant, or maybe, in a way, it was. Maybe the experience had changed me, made me carry myself differently. A few days later, Mrs. Henderson called. "Mark," she said, "we'd like to offer you the caretaker position. Can you start Monday?" I almost dropped the phone. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you so much." I hung up and just stood there, grinning like an idiot. Then I let out a whoop of joy. Sarah came running in. "What is it? What's happened?" "I got the job," I yelled, grabbing her and swinging her around. "I got the job at the community center." We hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. Lily and Tom came in, caught up in the excitement, even before they knew why. That night, for the first time in months, we had a small celebration. Sarah made a meatloaf, my favorite. We even splurged on a bottle of soda. As we ate, I thought about everything that had happened. The despair of losing my job, the constant worry, the gnawing fear, and then that rainy day seeing Maria and her children. If I hadn't stopped, if I'd just driven by, consumed by my own problems, the job at the community center wasn't a high-paying corporate gig. It wouldn't make us rich. But it was steady, it was work I enjoyed, and it was enough. Enough to pay the bills, Enough to put food on the table without that constant sickening worry. Enough to breathe again. More than that, it felt meaningful. I was fixing things, helping people, being part of a community. A few weeks into the new job, I was repairing a leaky faucet in the center's kitchen when Mrs. Henderson came in. "Mark, you're doing a wonderful job," she said. "Everyone's so pleased. You have such a positive attitude," I smiled. "Thanks, Mrs. Henderson, I enjoy being here." "You know," she continued, "when you came for the interview there was something about you, a certain, I don't know, quiet strength, sense of compassion. That's important here." I thought about that later as I walked home. Compassion, strength. I hadn't felt strong or compassionate when I was at my lowest. I'd felt weak, defeated. But helping Maria, it hadn't just helped her. It had helped me. It had reminded me that even when you think you have nothing, you still have something to give. A kind word, a shared meal, a moment of your time, and in giving, you receive. Not always in material ways. Sometimes it's something much deeper, a sense of connection, a sense of purpose, a rediscovery of your own humanity. That was the life-changing truth I'd stumbled upon that rainy day. It wasn't some grand philosophical revelation. It was simple. We're all in this together, and the richest person isn't the one with the most money, but the one who gives the most of themselves. When I saw Maria and her kids, I was a struggling dad, barely hanging on. I thought I was empty with nothing left to offer. But in that moment of reaching out, of sharing the little I had, I found something I'd lost. Hope. Not just hope for them, but hope for myself. It wasn't that helping them magically solved all my problems, but it shifted my perspective. It broke the cycle of my own inward-looking despair. It reminded me that there was a world beyond my own worries, and that I could still make a positive difference in it, however small, and that in turn seemed to open up doors. Maybe it was just coincidence that the community center job came along when it did. Or maybe by opening my heart a little, I had somehow opened myself up to new possibilities. Maybe that quiet strength Mrs. Henderson saw was a reflection of the inner change that had begun when I decided to stop for a family shivering. In a doorway, I still wear Maria's scarf on cold days. It's a bit frayed now, but it's precious to me. It reminds me of a time when I was at my lowest and how reaching out to help someone else in need was the first step towards finding my own way back. It reminds me that true wealth isn't about what you accumulate, but what you share. And that sometimes the greatest discoveries are made not in moments of triumph, but in simple acts of kindness, when one struggling soul reaches out to another. Life is still a challenge, of course. There are always bills, always worries, but they don't consume me anymore. I look at Sarah, at Lily and Tom, and my heart is full. We have enough. We have each other. And I have the knowledge, bone deep and certain, that even in the darkest of times, a little bit of light shared can change everything. It changed Maria's life. And in ways I never could have imagined, it changed mine too. The life-changing truth was this: by lifting others, you invariably lift yourself, your spirit, your hope, and sometimes, quite unexpectedly, your circumstances, too. It's about connection, pure and simple. And that connection, I realized, is what truly makes us rich. The rain was hammering down, one of those gray, endless afternoons where the world feels like it's sighing along with you. I was driving my old pickup, Betsy. She's seen better days, much like myself. The wipers scraped back and forth, a tired, rhythmic complaint. Another day, another no thanks. The plant I'd given 15 years to had packed up and left town 6 months back. Downsizing, they'd called it. Felt more like being thrown overboard to me. My wife, Sarah, God bless her, was working every extra shift she could get at the diner, but tips are a fickle thing. Our little nest egg, the one we'd squirreled away for rainy days, well, it was pouring, and the nest was empty. Every morning I'd see the worry in Sarah's eyes and the quiet confusion in my kids. Lily, who was 10 and trying to be a grown-up about it all, and Tom, only 7, who just knew his tummy rumbled more than it used to. Tom's bewildered little face, That was the knife that twisted sharpest. "Any luck, Mark?" Sarah would ask when I trudged in, her voice carefully light, like she was afraid to break something. "Not today, love. Keeping on, though." I'd try to sound breezy, but the weight of it all felt like lead in my boots. This particular afternoon, I'd struck out at a warehouse, a building site where the foreman barely looked up, and a temp agency that offered me a few hours a week. Filing papers, starting next Tuesday. It was a crumb, and I was grateful for it, but it felt like trying to plug a dam with a thimble. Heading home, feeling lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut, I saw them. Under the awning of a boarded-up shop, a woman was huddled with two small children. They were drenched, shivering. The little girl, about Lily's age, had her face pressed into her mother's coat. The boy, younger than my Tom, just stared blankly at the falling rain, his eyes too big for his pinched face. The woman, she looked like a candle that had guttered out, not just sad or tired, but empty. My first thought, and I'm not proud of it, was to keep driving. I had my own family on the brink. Every cent was counted, every slice of bread. What could I possibly do for them? But then the little boy had a tremor, a full-body shiver that shook him from head to toe. And I saw Tom, my Tom, in his place. I couldn't. I just couldn't drive on. I pulled Betsy to the curb, her engine grumbling. I leaned over and wound down the window, the cold rain instantly spattering my face. "Excuse me, are you folks all right?" I called out. The woman jumped, startled. Her eyes, when she looked up, were red and raw. She pulled her children even closer. We're fine," she managed, her voice raspy, barely there. "Fine." They looked like they were about to shatter. "Are you sure? You're soaked." "To the bone." Can I offer you a lift? To a shelter, maybe?" She shook her head slowly. "They're all full. We've tried." Her voice broke on the last word, a cold fist clenched around my heart. Full. Of course they were. Times were hard all over. Have you eaten anything today?" I asked, already knowing the answer and dreading it. She dropped her gaze to her hands, clasped tight in her lap. The little girl risked a peek from under her mother's arm, and her eyes, big, haunted pools, met mine. It was that look. The same one I saw in Tom's eyes too often lately. Pure, aching hunger. My chest felt tight. I had exactly $27 in my wallet. It was earmarked for gas to get me to that temp job next week, and hopefully a loaf of bread and a carton of milk for my own kids. "Listen," I said, a decision forming in my heart, one that felt both reckless and utterly right. "There's a diner just down the street. Let me get you all something hot to eat. Some soup or something, please." She hesitated. You could see the pride fighting with the sheer, desperate need on her face. Then she looked down at her children, at their shivering bodies, and the fight went out of her. "Okay," she whispered, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "Thank you." Getting them into Betsy's cab was slow. They were so cold, their clothes sodden and heavy. I turned the heater on full blast, and soon the small space was filled with the scent of damp wool, rain, and another faint, almost sweetish smell that I later recognized as the odor of prolonged fasting. At the diner, I settled them into a booth. Betty, one of the waitresses who knew Sarah, came over with a kind smile. I told her to bring them whatever they wanted, on me. The children stared at the laminated menus like they were pages from a storybook filled with unbelievable treasures. The mother, whose name I learned was Maria, just kept murmuring, "God bless you. Thank you. Thank you." They ordered simply, bowls of tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and hot chocolates for the kids. When the food arrived, they ate with a quiet, desperate intensity that told its own story. I watched the little boy, Leo, meticulously dip his sandwich into his soup, his eyes squeezed shut in what looked like pure ecstasy. The girl, Elena, sipped her hot chocolate with tiny, careful sips, as if trying to make the warmth last forever. Maria ate slowly, almost painfully, as if her stomach wasn't used to food anymore. She kept her eyes on her children, I ordered a black coffee I couldn't really afford and tried to make gentle conversation. Her story tumbled out, broken and hesitant at first, then in a rush, as if the floodgates of her misery had finally given way. Her husband had abandoned them, taken every penny they had, even cleared out their small apartment while she was out looking for day work. They'd been on the streets for 3 days. She'd been walking miles trying to find any kind of work, but no one wanted to hire a woman with 2 young children in tow and no permanent address. Suddenly my own troubles, as real and pressing as they were, seemed different. Not this raw, immediate life-or-death struggle for basic survival. When they were finished, I settled the bill. $22 and change. I was left with less than $5, barely enough for that loaf of bread. Gas for the temp job was definitely off the table for now. A fresh wave of anxiety about my own family washed over me, but I pushed it down. I don't know how I can ever repay you, Maria said, her eyes swimming with fresh tears. Don't you worry about that, I said, and I was surprised by the genuine warmth spreading through my chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the diner's heaters. We all need a hand sometimes. But you... She looked at my frayed cuffs, my old truck parked outside. You don't look like you have much to spare. I managed a small smile. Enough for today, I guess. I couldn't just leave them there, to wander back out into the cold, damp evening. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the air was biting. Where will you go now? I asked. She shook her head, despair instantly clouding her features again. I don't know. There's a church on Elm Street. Sometimes they have emergency vouchers for a motel room for a night. Elm Street. It was on my way home. Hop in, I said. I can run you over there. Back in Betsy's warm cab, Elena, the little girl, reached out a small, shy hand and touched my arm. Thank you, mister, she said, her voice as small as a bird's. That hot chocolate was the bestest thing ever. A lump formed in my throat. You're very welcome, sweetheart. At the church, a kind-faced pastor listened patiently to Maria's story, his expression growing troubled. Maria, I'm so sorry, but our voucher fund is completely depleted at the moment. Times are very hard. But we do have a small room in the parish house. It's usually used for storage. It's not much, just a couple of cots, but it's dry and warm. You'd be welcome to stay there for a night or two until we can try and figure something more permanent out. The relief that flooded Maria's face was so profound, she almost buckled. Oh, Pastor, thank you. Thank you. That would be a miracle. I helped them carry their few possessions, a couple of worn plastic bags stuffed with clothes, into the little room. It was tiny, smelling of old paper and beeswax, but it was clean, and the pastor found some thick blankets. As I turned to leave, Maria grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I will never ever forget this, Mr. Mark, I supplied. My name's Mark. Mark, she repeated as if committing it to memory. God sent you to us today. I know he did. I mumbled something about being glad I could help, feeling a bit awkward, and drove away. My heart felt like a strange mix of heavy and light, heavy for their terrible situation, but light for having been able to do something, however small. When I got home, Sarah was pacing, her face a mask of worry. Mark, oh, thank heavens, where have you been? I was starting to get so scared. I sat her down and told her everything. About Maria, Elena, and Leo, about the diner, the $22 that was meant for our groceries. She listened without a word, her eyes fixed on mine, searching. When I finished, she didn't say a word about the money. Instead, she came over and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. You did a good thing, Mark, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. A really, truly good thing. That night, dinner was just pasta with a thin smear of tomato paste from the very bottom of a jar, but somehow it tasted richer than any feast. Lily and Tom were full of questions about the family I'd helped. Were they really hungry, Daddy? Tom asked, his eyes wide with a child's innocent horror. Yes, son, they really were. Can we give them some of my old toys? Lily asked, her brow furrowed with concern. She cherished her collection of well-loved dolls. My heart swelled, so much I thought it might burst. That's a wonderful idea, sweetie. A truly wonderful idea. Maybe we can take some things over to them tomorrow. The next day, I used my last few dollars to buy a small bag of groceries. A loaf of fresh bread, a jar of peanut butter, a few apples, a carton of milk. Sarah carefully packed up a box with some of Lily's outgrown but still beloved dolls and a handful of Tom's sturdy toy cars. We drove together to the church. Maria was speechless. Elena's face lit up like a Christmas tree when she saw the dolls, her earlier shyness forgotten. Leo immediately grabbed a little red fire truck and started making nee-naw sounds, zooming it across the polished floor. We stayed for a bit. Sarah and Maria fell into easy conversation, two mothers sharing their worries and hopes. I got down on the floor with Leo, showing him how to make his fire truck jump over a crack in the linoleum. For that little while, I completely forgot about my own looming bills and uncertain future. I just saw two children, their faces bright with happiness over simple gifts, and a mother whose eyes for the first time held a tiny, flickering spark of hope where yesterday there had only been bleak despair. Over the next few days, we made it a point to visit them. Sarah would bring a Tupperware of leftovers from the diner when she could, or we'd scrape together a few dollars for some fruit or juice. We learned more about Maria. She was a proud woman, a hard worker, had done cleaning and childcare before her world fell apart. She was resourceful and fiercely protective of her children. The pastor was working his contacts, trying to find a more stable solution for them. In the meantime, my temp filing job started. It was as dull as dishwater, but it was 3 hours of paid work each day. It wasn't a fortune, but combined with Sarah's wages, it meant we could keep the lights on and the wolf from the door for another month. One afternoon after my shift, I stopped by the church. Maria greeted me with a smile that reached her eyes, a real, genuine smile. "Mark, I have wonderful news," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with excitement. "The pastor, he found a family from the church. They need a live-in housekeeper and someone to look after their children. They interviewed me yesterday. They liked me. I start next Monday. It comes with a small apartment over their garage." A huge wave of relief washed over me, so strong I felt a little lightheaded. "Maria, that's just fantastic. I'm so incredibly happy for you." Elena and Leo came skidding around the corner, their faces beaming. "We're going to have our own beds, Mark," Elena announced proudly, "and a yard to play," Leo added, his eyes shining like new pennies. That evening, as I told Sarah the news, I felt a profound sense of calm. It was peculiar. My own situation hadn't magically resolved itself. I was still drastically underemployed, still haunted by the fear of what tomorrow might bring. But helping Maria and her children, seeing them find a safe harbor, it had done something profound to me. It was as if a tiny candle had been lit in a very dark room, and its gentle glow was pushing back the shadows. A few days later, Maria and the kids moved into their new little place. We helped them carry their few bags. The apartment wasn't fancy, just a couple of small rooms, but it was clean and bright, and the family she was working for seemed genuinely kind and welcoming. As we were about to leave, Maria shyly pressed a small, slightly lumpy, clumsily wrapped package into my hand. "What's this?" I asked, surprised. "It's not much," she said, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I knitted it while I was at the church, for you, for everything." Later that evening at home, I carefully unwrapped it. It was a simple, dark, blue knitted scarf. It wasn't perfectly crafted. There were a few dropped stitches here and there, a slight unevenness to the rows, but it was warm, and it was so clearly made with love and gratitude. I put it on. It felt like the warmest, softest scarf in the entire world. The following week, something felt different. I still went to my filing job, still diligently scanned the job listings, still faced the usual rejections, but the heavy, suffocating blanket of despair that had been my constant companion for months had eased. It had lifted just a little. I found myself thinking about Maria, about how one small act of kindness, one shared meal offered in a moment of impulse, had made such a monumental difference in 3 lives. It wasn't about the money. The $22 I'd spent at the diner had been a significant sum for us at that moment, but what it had purchased, for them, and strangely for me, was utterly immeasurable. One morning, Sarah was scanning the local paper, a frown of concentration on her face. "Mark, look at this," she said, pointing to a small, unassuming ad. "Local community center. They're looking for a part-time caretaker. Handyman skills a plus. It's not full-time, but it's more hours. Then the filing and better pay." My heart gave an unaccustomed little jump. Handyman skills. That I had in spades. I'd always been good with my hands, fixing things, building things. "I'll go down there first thing," I said, and I heard a spark of my old, confident self in my voice. It was a crisp, chilly morning, so I wrapped Maria's scarf around my neck. The community center was a cheerful, bustling place, echoing with the laughter of children and the chatter of seniors. I met with the director, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Henderson, who had surprisingly kind eyes. We talked for a good while. I told her about my years at the factory, my knack for repairs, my willingness to work hard and learn new things. I didn't mention our financial struggles or the story of Maria and her children. It didn't seem directly relevant, or perhaps in a deeper, less obvious way. It was. Perhaps that whole experience had subtly changed me, altered the way I carried myself, the way I met the world. A few days later, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Henderson. "Mark," she said, her voice warm, "we were very impressed with you. We'd like to offer you the caretaker position. Can you start on Monday?" I nearly dropped the receiver. Yes, Mrs. Henderson, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much." I hung up the phone and just stood there for a moment, a wide, goofy grin spreading across my face. Then I let out a whoop of pure, unadulterated joy. Sarah came running from the kitchen, her eyes wide. "What is it, Mark? What's happened?" "I got the job," I shouted, grabbing her by the waist and swinging her around in a circle. "I got the job at the community center." We hugged, laughing and crying all at once. Lily and Tom came, rushing in, caught up in the sudden wave of happiness even before they understood its source. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we had a small celebration. Sarah made my favorite, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy. We even splurged on a 2-liter bottle of soda. As we ate, our little kitchen filled with warmth and laughter, I thought about the roller coaster of the past few months. The crushing despair of losing my job, the relentless gnawing worry, the constant fear of not being able to provide for my family. And then, that rainy, miserable afternoon, seeing Maria and her children, shivering and hopeless in that doorway. If I hadn't stopped, if I'd just kept my eyes on the road, consumed by my own troubles, the job at the community center wasn't going to make us rich. It wasn't a high-powered executive position, but it was steady work. Work I found genuinely enjoyable, and it paid enough to cover the mortgage, enough to put good food on the table without that constant, sickening knot of anxiety in my stomach, enough to finally breathe again. More than that, it felt meaningful. I was fixing things that were broken, helping people in small ways, being a useful part of a vibrant community. A few weeks into the new job, I was wrestling with a stubbornly leaky faucet in the center's kitchen when Mrs. Henderson came in, a smile on her face. "Mark, I just wanted to tell you you're doing a wonderful job," she said. "Everyone's so pleased. You have such a positive attitude and you're so resourceful." I straightened up, wiping my hands on a rag. "Thanks, Mrs. Henderson. I really enjoy being here. You know," she continued, her gaze thoughtful, "when you came in for your interview, there was something about you, a certain, I don't know, a quiet strength, a sense of compassion. That's very important in a place like this." I thought about her words later, as I walked home in the crisp autumn air. Maria's scarf tucked warmly around my neck. Compassion. Strength. I hadn't felt particularly strong or compassionate when I was at my lowest ebb. I'd felt weak, defeated, hollowed out. But helping Maria, it hadn't just been about helping her and her children. It had, in some strange and unexpected way, helped me. It had reminded me that even when you feel like you have absolutely nothing left to give, you still possess the power to offer something. A kind word, a shared meal, a moment of your time, your presence, and in the act of giving, you receive something in return. Not always something tangible, not always something you can hold in your hand. Sometimes it's something far more profound, far more valuable, a sense of connection to others, a renewed sense of purpose in your own life, a gentle rediscovery of your own humanity. That, I realized, was the life-changing truth I'd stumbled upon on that dreary, rain-soaked day. It wasn't some earth-shattering philosophical revelation. It was beautifully, wonderfully simple. We're all connected. We're all in this life together. And the truly wealthiest person isn't the one with the biggest bank account or the fanciest possessions, but the one who gives the most of themselves, the one who shares their light, however small it may seem. When I saw Maria and her children, I was a struggling dad, teetering on the edge of despair. I thought I was empty, drained, with nothing left to offer anyone. But in that one impulsive moment of reaching out, of sharing the little I had, I found something I had lost. Hope. Not just hope for them, but hope for myself, for my own family. It wasn't that helping them magically erased all my problems overnight, but it fundamentally shifted my perspective. It broke the miserable, inward-looking cycle of my own despair, reminded me that there was a world beyond my own anxieties, and that I, Mark, still had the capacity to make a positive difference in that world, however modest. And that, in turn, seemed to subtly open doors. Maybe it was just a coincidence that the community center job appeared when it did. Or maybe, just maybe, by opening my heart a little wider, by letting in a little of someone else's pain and trying to ease it, I had somehow made myself more receptive to new possibilities, more visible to good fortune. Maybe that quiet strength Mrs. Henderson had perceived was a reflection of the inner transformation that had begun the moment I decided to stop Betsy for a desperate mother and her 2 shivering children. I still wear Maria's blue scarf on chilly days. It's a little more worn now, a bit frayed around the edges, but it's one of my most treasured possessions. It's a tangible reminder of a time when I was at my very lowest, and how the simple act of reaching out to help someone else in even greater need was, paradoxically, the first crucial step towards finding my own way back to solid ground. It reminds me, every time I touch its soft, imperfect wool, that true wealth isn't measured by what you accumulate for yourself, but by what you willingly share with others, and that sometimes the most profound and life-altering discoveries are made not in moments of grand triumph or worldly success, but in the quiet, unassuming spaces of simple human kindness, when one struggling soul finds the courage to reach out and touch another. Life still has its ups and downs, of course. There are always bills to pay, worries that niggle at the edges of your mind, but they don't consume me anymore. I look at Sarah, at Lily and Tom, and my heart is full, not with fear, but with gratitude. We have enough. We have each other, and I carry within me the certain bone-deep knowledge that even in the darkest of times, a little bit of light, generously shared, has the power to change everything. It changed Maria's life, and in ways I could never have foreseen or imagined. It fundamentally, beautifully changed mine too. The life-changing truth was this: by lifting others, you invariably, inevitably lift yourself. Your spirit, your hope, your belief in the good of the world, and sometimes, quite unexpectedly, your circumstances as well. It's all about connection, pure and simple, and that connection I finally understood is what truly, truly makes us rich.